Hi, and welcome aboard as a client of Firefly Photography. I've been a business photographer for many years now, and I understand how difficult it is being photographed. Well, from experience I can tell you that being in front of a video camera is a whole different ballgame. So in this series of videos, I'm going to take you through a few preparatory steps to help you get the most out of your filming and make sure that we give an absolutely perfect product to you at the end of it. We're going to be covering your clothing, your grooming, and the delivery of your speech. And hopefully, by the time you've watched all these preparatory videos, you'll have a far better understanding of how to do it well. Let's get started. So let's talk clothing. There's a couple of things that I like to say. Make sure that your clothing fits you well. Make sure that it's clothing that you feel comfortable in. Make sure that it's well cleaned and well pressed. And certainly, we've already discussed, hopefully in our first meeting, the color or the design of your background. Think about what you're wearing and how that relates to the background itself. Secondly, with your clothing, because clothing tends to crease when you're driving, by all means, bring your clothing with you and we can use the change area for you to get changed before you start getting filmed. Another thing that you should be contemplating is how your clothing will fit well with a microphone. So remember, we're going to be using what's called a lavalier mic, which is this thing I'm wearing right here. It needs an attachment point, and there's a couple of important things to think about there. It needs to be in a place where no other part of clothing will ruffle on it. So if you're thinking of wearing things with frills, be careful of that. And secondly, if you're somebody, not like me, who has long hair, how your hair falls and rustles against that will have an effect on it as well. So we're looking for clothing with a good attachment point for a microphone. If you're not sure about it, bring a couple of options and we can see what works best. Okay, here's another crucial piece of advice when it comes to your clothing. No green at all. So no green in your logo, not even a stitch of it somewhere. The reason for this is quite simple. When we're filming you, we'll film you on a green screen. In the editing part of it, we remove every stitch of green from that video file. And if you're wearing green, well, you're going to disappear like this. And I'm sure you'll agree with me, we don't want you looking like that on your video. Now, the next thing I want you to consider is this. Wear clothing that's appropriate and inoffensive. The rule I'd normally give is quite simple. Think about your intended audience. If it's your job to offend or be a little bit out there, well then that might work fine. But clothing that might set you up to look like somebody you're not or create the completely wrong impression of you, well, be very careful of that. Think about your intended audience, wear clothing that's appropriate for that audience. Okay, so this piece of advice is not exactly firm, but it's almost better to avoid wearing shirts that have a very fine pattern or fine lines on them. There's a phenomenon known as moire, where the sensor of the camera struggles to interpret fine patterns, especially with movement. So if you're bouncing around a little bit, it might show up a little bit weird and it might detract from you. That's the last thing we want. We want people having a listen to what you have to say and not focusing on what your clothing is doing. And to avoid this entirely, wearing clothing that is either of one color or very plain would be a better option. Okay, let's move on to your grooming. So in this section, I'd like to speak about the things you do to make yourself look better for the camera. We're going to talk about quite a bit, but it's fairly simple. Let's get started. So when it comes to grooming, here's a piece of advice that I've given every single one of my portrait clients. And it sounds really strange, but it's really, really on point. Treat the shoot like a first date. I'm a 40-year-old male. My wife tells me to be ready at 7, I'll be there at 5 minutes to and be fine. When I was younger and I was dating, it was a whole different story. Grooming, washing, shaving, the whole shebang. And that's exactly what I want you to do when preparing to be videoed. For males, I know it sounds like a really weird thing to say, But nose hair, ear hair, all the funny little things that might pop up on a camera and just detract from what's going on. Think about that. Brush your teeth. Floss if you have to. Make sure your smile looks good. Make sure that you're presenting the best version of yourself on the day that you're being filmed. Treat it like a first date. So here are a couple of tips to help your skin look better on camera. Number one, moisturize, and that includes your lips. So I usually advocate to use something that isn't oily, because oily products will shine up under lighting, but dry skin is a bit of a detractor. We don't want that. Moisturize your skin, pay attention to your lips as well. Number two, think about what you're doing the day before. Obviously, it would be very good to avoid unnecessary sun exposure before you're being videoed. Coming in here with a massive sunburn or a really red face, it's going to make it kind of difficult to fix that in post-production. Think about that. For women, your makeup, wear your makeup, your base layer, about a third heavier than what you would for a normal day. This is more about reducing shine on your skin, but also about, well, evening out your skin tone. It's easy to edit that on a photograph, a whole lot harder for a video. And while we're talking about that, if you would like to have it done professionally, I can certainly recommend a couple of people, a really good makeup artist nearby who can help you with that if you'd like to pay to have it done professionally before the shoot. And lastly, bring things to touch up your makeup on the day. There's nothing against us stopping a little bit, having a look in a mirror and fixing up if we need to. Make your skin look good. It'll help a lot. Okay, so we've come to what I consider to be the most important piece of preparatory advice for being filmed, and that's how to speak well on camera. In this section, I want to give you some advice on how to deliver your speech well, but also effective body language. Being filmed is an alien experience for most people, and I want to do enough here to allow you to practice properly so that when the day comes, most of your nerves will have been taken care of and you'll be able to deliver your speech well. Let's get started. So let's start off with body language. There's a very good reason I'm doing this. Studies have shown that in a communicated message, 7% of that message relies on the words themselves, 38% on how those words are spoken, but a whopping 55% of your message is all about your body language. So it seems like a really smart thing to do, to give a little bit of advice on how to present yourself well with your body language. So in terms of body language, the first thing I want to speak about is your posture. Now there's a lot to say here. Number one, we're going to be filming you standing. So how you stand matters. There are a couple of things to think, and certainly none of these are hard and fast rules, but when you're practicing at home, I want you to think of the options and see what fits well for you. So let's speak about how you're orientated to the camera. You can stand square on, but that can be seen as quite confrontational. If it works for you, that's a good idea, but it might not be a bad idea to angle yourself a little bit. See what you think about that. The next thing is how well you're oriented to the camera. And by that I mean most people, if they're a little bit nervous, are going to lean back a little bit. So on camera you're going to look a little bit scared, a little bit frightened, a little bit affronted. What works better? Lean into it. I'm listening to you. I'm engaging with you. That's what I want you to do. My next piece of advice is also not one that's very critical for being videoed, but it does help a little bit. And that concerns your jawline. Now again, this is a whole lot more important if you're being photographed because, well, on a headshot, that's very visible. On a video such as this, my face is a very small part of what you're seeing. But for a guy especially, you want a nice strong jawline. And the way to fix that is as you're standing, just to pop your head forward while you're talking. Now, you certainly wouldn't be walking around the street looking like this. But on a video, looks a whole lot better. So if I'm back, it's giving me a bit of a double chin, a little bit forward. We've changed things up a little bit stronger, a little bit more professional, definitely makes a better impact. So here's a point that's pretty important. Forget the camera. I want you to imagine that that camera is actually a person that you're speaking to. And in normal conversation, we make eye contact with the person we're talking to. You need to do the same when you're being filmed. And eye contact in this context is nothing more than me looking straight down the lens of the camera. Be careful of drifting off into thought and getting your eyes off. We're not concentrating, thinking about something else, coming back in. That can be quite distracting. Also, focusing on the wrong point while you're talking. That also looks a little bit weird when you're watching it after the fact. Straight down the lens of the camera, keep smiling, keep happy, make contact with the person, I guess, that is the camera. Another crucial part of connecting with the person watching your video is your facial expression. You need to think about how well you're appearing in front of them. Smile, look happy, look energetic, look enthused, look like you're happy to be where you are. If we start looking confused or a little bit affronted or a little bit nervous, it's going to come across in the video, and we want to try and avoid that as best we can. This is another reason why practicing in front of a mirror is such a good thing. Look at yourself while you're talking. Have a look at your face. Smile, be happy. Let's speak now about your delivery, how you say the things you say. And going back to what I said earlier, 38% of your message is how you say what you say. Only 7% are the exact words that you use. So I'll give you an example. I love what I do. I love what I do. Very different. Same words, different delivery, different message, and they're going to be interpreted differently as well. So these tips are about trying to get your message across well in the way that you say it. So here's a little tip I like to call walking off the edge. Generally, for people being filmed, the tendency is to start their speech quite loudly and then settle into a normal speaking tone. So it sounds something like this. Hi, I'm Rory. I'm a photographer. It's a bit distracting. Now, it can be edited out later and fixed, but far better to get it right. So again, when you start speaking, just ease into it and start off with a normal conversational volume. It'll work a whole lot better. Please remember that on the day, there is no pressure to get it done in one take. Work on your nerves, and we'll work through that. We might need a few takes to get it right, but control your breathing and focus on delivering your message calmly, clearly, and as slow as you need to. Obviously, don't drag on your speech, but conversely, don't speak too quickly, because then you're going to look a little bit rushed and it's not going to sound good. Take a breath, take it easy, deliver it calmly, speak normally, make it clear, and get your message across that way. So I have just given an example of that, but watch the speed of your speech. Use pauses for emphasis. Speak slowly to get a message across, but watch that you're not trying to speak too quickly. Believe me, if you've never been filmed before, you're likely to start speaking a whole lot faster just to get to the end of things. Watch the speed at which you speak. Changing your speed can be used for emphasis. Again, and I've said it again and again, practice. It will help. So we've already covered not speaking too loudly at the beginning, but think about volume as a tool as well. You want to keep an even volume all the way through, and certainly not get louder and then softer. Those are really difficult things to fix. Practice on keeping your voice level, speaking in a nice conversational volume, and not ranging that volume too much during the process. So we've spoken about volume. So let's speak a little bit about voice modulation. Now, this is not speaking louder or softer, but this is changing the intonation of your voice, sounding more excited, slowing things down a little bit. Do not speak in a monotonous way, because that's going to make everybody feel a little bit more bored. But if you've got a point to make, be a little bit more animated, be excited, show your enthusiasm. The best tip I have for that is to prepare your speech about the things that you like. If you're passionate about your job, this should be easy. But speak from the heart, speak with feeling, put emotion into what you're saying. Another thing to remember is use your pauses. In punctuation, the full stop is there for a reason. You'll have prepared your speech, and you might be under a little bit of pressure in your mind to remember what you've written and just keep speaking. But take some time to pause. A pause could be used for dramatic effect as well. It can emphasize a point. And certainly, it's a tool you need to use when delivering your speech. Don't rush, remember to breathe, and take a pause between your sentences. I've grouped this as part of delivery, but technically it's also body language. And this is your hand gestures and what you're doing while you're talking. Now certainly, you don't want to be standing and doing nothing all the way through. You're going to look a little bit, well, dead, to be honest. But you also don't want to be doing too much at the same time and looking a little bit that it's distracting. Think about what you're doing. Again, another reason to practice well in front of a mirror. Use your hand gestures to emphasize the points you're making. Take it easy, watch a couple of videos, see what works for you, but practice in front of a mirror. Don't stand there dead, don't stand there immobile. Have a little bit of energy, but figure out what works well for you. Practice. So here's a crucial thing for you to be paying attention to, especially when you're practicing. Filler words and sounds. So filler is nothing more than, a thing we do when we're awkward. It's the ums and the buts and the and the as we're speaking. It's really, really hard to pick that up in your own speech unless you're actively listening for it. But certainly if somebody else, say for example at a networking meeting, gets up and delivers a speech filled with buts and ums, yeah, you notice that. And for the purposes of this video, we want to try and eliminate them as much as possible or completely for your audience so that you look like you have prepared well and that you're delivering a crisp, clear, flawless speech. Last but not least, by no means least, this is probably the most important piece of advice I can give you. You need to practice. There's a very good reason why I scheduled the filming no less than 2 weeks from our first meeting. You need to practice. So I need you to work out your speech, and then I need you to practice delivering it. Deliver it in front of a mirror, having a look at your body language, your smiling, all the things we've already mentioned. Film yourself with your phone. Have a listen. Try and pick up those filler words. Listen to how you're delivering your speech, the speed, your expressions. And more importantly than that, and I would highly recommend this, speak in front of somebody. Get used to delivering your speech well. Prepare yourself as much as you can for the day you're being filmed, and I guarantee you the results will astound you. I'm looking forward to working with you. So there you have it, what I consider to be a comprehensive list of preparatory items to help you get the best out of your session in front of the camera. I hope they've been useful to you. Certainly, I take pride in doing a good job for my clients. Please take a look at them again. Feel free to watch this as much as you need to. But if it's easier for you to have a recap in a written version, there is a PDF available for you to have a read. Prepare well. I look forward to seeing you in the studio, and I look forward to showing you something that absolutely knocks your socks off at the end.